Good morning, everybody. This is Tanya from Mommy Homeopathy. I'm here with Kate Birch from Free and Healthy Children, and really an honor to have Kate and to know Kate and to just really have her on the planet. Kate and I have known each other for several years now, and she's the author of many books, and she's got her new release on her book that she's going to talk about, which is the best Homeopathy Family Guide. I'm really excited and honored to have Kate here today. And, you know, we're all starting the new year with New Year resolutions, and really, you know, it's that time of year where we're like, this year we're going to do it differently. And I remember the first year that I met Kate, it really changed my life and changed the life of my children and my practice and what she's done in the world. And she's very humble and intelligent, and she's really an amazing resource. And what she does behind closed doors and what she's done, I really have been doing my due diligence to spread the word. And I have many families, over 100 families that are on some of the programs with me that Kate has put together. I'm just really honored to have her here. And today I'm going to be interviewing Kate on her new release, and we're going to do the connection between what does mommy gut, survival of your baby, government and infectious disease, what do they all have in common? So Kate is going to go through those things with us today, and we're going to touch on some other areas with questions that have come in and things that have been happening just in the plan and overall. So with that, welcome Kate Birch. And
hi, Tanya.
Excited to hear this.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. All right. So just a little more background about me. I'm a homeopath and have been for 22 years, and I became intrigued with the vaccine question from before I ever became a homeopath, when my son was first vaccinated, and he is 31 years old now. And at that time, I was a young mom, and I didn't know very much about things. I had ideas, and, you know, and when the doctor pulled out the vaccine I wasn't even prepared that that was what was going to happen at that 2-month well baby visit. And she was also my midwife. She herself was pregnant with her 7th child. I had both of my children in Mendocino County there in Northern California, which was, you know, a lot of natural childbirth, so when she pulled the vaccine out and said, well, it's time to give this, I knew I had a flinch in my stomach. I didn't know exactly what all that was, but she said, well, it's infectious disease and, you know, DPT, and, you know, we need this. And so I did. And he screamed for about 24 hours after that vaccine with a kind of high-pitched screaming, which is one of the first side effects that's ever been recorded from the DPT vaccine. And I knew it didn't sit right with me, but I didn't have the language to be able to do anything about that, you know. So life went on, and I did give him his 4-month shots, and that time I was a little more prepared as you could be I brought a poultice of herbs, of plantain and calendula and things like that to put on the wound site, you know, to soothe that, and thinking that it was just this local experience, and maybe it was the shock of the needle that went into his system that, you know, created the high-pitched screaming, not later realizing that that high-pitched screaming is a kind of encephalopathy that is created by the neurotoxins of the DPT vaccine. So this was the beginning of my journey, and what it's taken me, my first book, Vaccine Free, Prevention and Treatment of Infectious Disease with Homeopathy, was written I started writing in 2005. It was published in 2007, and it was written after already seeing hundredfold. I mean, there was no autism when my son was born. There was no ADHD. There was no hyperactivity. There was no behavioral or developmental disorders in any of the children that I knew. That was not a phenomena that we saw then. It was 1985. But and they only had a few vaccines. So I do know that after the MMR vaccine, he went into probably a 6-month phase of stammering, and I didn't understand that. But we were also introduced to homeopathy at the time, and the remedy Mercurius, pulled him out of the stammering. But he then had his kindergarten shots at 6 years of age, and that summer he got bit by a mouse, which he went into a kind of mild anaphylaxis, and then later developed asthma. And I had a homeopath at the time, and I kept going to the homeopath, and it's like somehow this mouse bite is creating the asthma. I don't know how, because anywhere you look, there's no research saying that mouse bites cause anaphylaxis. And, long story short is I continued on the journey. I had my daughter, and she was never vaccinated. I was in homeopathy school, and she's 24 now. And then I started seeing more and more people in my practice with vaccine damage or what looked like vaccine damage, and the children's health that I was seeing in the 90s started deteriorating. We started seeing more behavioral problems, attention deficit, and then really at 2000, the year 2000, when the autism rates were, coming to 1 in 500, I was like, I know this has to do with the vaccine. And then it wasn't until I was giving a lecture in 2011, and I had on one of my slides the post of the vaccine ingredients. And even I had been lecturing with that slide and not clearly reading everything that was on there. And then that day I went through one by one all of the ingredients, and I'm like, oh my God, there's mouse serum. They have mouse serum in the vaccines. Oh, they have adjuvants in the vaccines, which causes the system to produce allergic response. So there we were, 20 years later, realizing what it was that created that anaphylaxis experience from the vaccine. But so going back to your question is, what does Mommy Gut have to do with this? Is in the years they've come and gone, and the vaccine stories are becoming more and more horrendous, and the number of vaccines that they want to introduce are becoming more and more, and parents' rights are getting taken away. And I've traveled all over the world and teaching and started watching. I've been treating vaccine damage from children from every country in the world, and the level of autism has reached the numbers that it is. I started becoming incredibly despairing, actually, of the state of affairs. And especially, while I was already despaired before I watched Vaxxed, but the statistics of the trajectory of the autism rate based on where we're going is not good. And so I started asking the world, universe question, like what do we need here? If something's not right. How do we curb this? And just going back and remembering myself as that young mom, or that feeling, is ultimately the survival of humanity starts with moms giving birth to their babies. I think that's where the Virgin Mary comes from. Whether she's a virgin or not is not the question. It's that the patron saint of mothers giving birth to their babies, that image has really stuck with me, in that we are the ones that know. We have the information inside of us. The problem is we've been living through a variety of external pressures that have taken away our knowing of that wisdom. Do you know what I mean? Are you there?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So lately, as I've been in my practice, I've been exploring that question more with moms. You know, what do you know? What do you know? And the thing is, we also have in homeopathy these matrodonal remedies, which are remedies made from the placenta, the amniotic fluid, the umbilical cord, vernix, and it's amazing how much information is transmitted through these substances. Like this is the cord of the mother, and mother's milk, you know. The very first nutrient is like our bodies, without us doing anything, without us thinking, know exactly how to provide for that baby. The placenta knows exactly what it's doing, how it's doing it. We don't have to think. We can just fall asleep or lay on the beach or whatever. Our bodies are doing that. And what's amazing about that is that we have a body knowledge that sometimes our minds don't want to listen to. And these days, with the amount of propaganda that's about, and just, Renelle, is that your name? Just what you're saying about, you know, the moms know that they want to protect their children, and so when the vaccine is given as an offering to satisfy that need, the moms will go for it. But the truth is that the vaccines, they're sheep in, or wolf in sheep's clothing, that there's something much more to it than that. So that's the first piece. And Tanya, what's the next on there?
The next piece is, so you just covered the mommy gut, the survival of the baby, and then government and infectious disease. What do they all have in common?
Yeah. So so what we're working with infectious disease is the immune system. And what I've also come to understand is that the immune system is our government inside of our body. Inside of our body, we have like the peripheral membranes, the mucous membranes, the skin. This is like the boundary of our government. We can call those our borders, you know. And when there is something foreign that is intruding, bypassing these borders, it's our immune system's job to kind of alert itself and get to work to set up an elimination pathway for that foreign intruder. Now, there's two sides to this, and I want to touch on this more as we get into infectious disease, but we've all been led to believe that infectious diseases, they're the bad meanies, and we need to protect ourselves against them. And the whole vaccine model is designed on this, and the use of antibiotics are designed on this paradigm that these infectious diseases are unwanted, not useful, can cause us death, and should be avoided at all costs. And some of the work that I've come to understand, and I want to get to this back to the Middle East, which, Tanya, you can talk a little bit about what you know, but I've been to the Middle East a few times, and then looking at the role of government with mandatory vaccine laws, there's a real imbalance that's happening. So we'll first go to the role of infectious disease, and particularly we can call them the childhood diseases, which are actually intended to have in childhood. And a lot of the vaccines, like that pneumococcal vaccine, they don't have one for streptococcal, but you know, all the bacteria that's on our body already means that it's actually supposed to be there. But it's the job of our immune system to maintain a healthy balance with that bacteria. And the tools that the immune system has to maintain that balance is a fever and a discharge. If the bacteria starts overpopulating, the body will get a fever to say, hey, wait a second here, what are you doing? And can cook them out, and then all the extra discharge needs to be, you know, expectorated from the body. So there's an intelligence in that government. And again, it's a government that our will is not involved in. It just operates on itself. The problem is that there's a variety of influences in life that weaken the strength of the immune system. And then either it does not push up a sufficient immunological response to create harmony with that pathogen, or the response is so strong that the reaction in itself puts the child or the person at risk. So if the fever is too high or the discharges are too profuse or things like that. So in this understanding, the goal of any kind of treatment is how do we get the immune system to operate in the best way possible so as to ensure its dominion over the body that it's governing. So then if we start looking at sort of idealistically what the role of social government should be, like the government, that we would want this precept to be at the primary forefront. Like, how can my citizens operate the best way within themselves so that their responses in life are not overreactive, like i.e. killing other people, or self-annihilating, i.e. don't take care of themselves enough so that they become malnourished, or sometimes it's a government problem not giving, having this. So that the role of government, that the ideal role of government is one that's in a benevolent state to ensure balance within the individual. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's pretty deep. I get it, so we can elaborate on that.
Yeah, so tell me from what I said, just jump off where you want me to clarify that more.
Okay, so what I get from that is, so there's you were saying that the immune system is like our government, okay?
Yeah.
And if we are utilizing our body in the optimal way, then our bodies know how to deal with, life is supposed to really be going on this flow. It's really not supposed to be like these fevers, and all these things are not bad things. So again, I'm just a little off how that connects with the government.
Yep. So, let's just keep going then.
Okay.
So I didn't talk about viruses and, the childhood viruses. And I have one little story that I'll share, and I know I shared this on the training. So how Tanya and I came to know each other is by the time I published my book, Vaccine Free, and then started traveling and teaching, I did have the opportunity to teach in Cuba. And the title of my paper was The Role of Government in Infectious Disease Prevention. And where am I going with this? So I'm going to weave that back in from my experience in Cuba, okay, and what their government is actually doing in infectious disease prevention. But that's where I met Isaac Golden. That's where I was going with that, where he introduced homeoprophylaxis. And so I met Tanya after putting together an organization, Free and Healthy Children International, copying Isaac Golden's work on, how to put forth a platform mechanism of access for homeoprophylaxis and what then the goal of homeoprophylaxis is. So, but just stepping back to what I was saying about the viruses and these childhood infectious diseases is that they come along in childhood with the express intent to mature our immune system towards a particular experience, whether that's an internal experience or in relationship with the outer world. And many people will say that, after my child has had chickenpox or measles, that yes, I had a fever, Yes, they struggled. Yes, they had a skin eruption. Yes, they had this. After that, they were able to talk and more clearly express themselves. They learned how to ride a bike. They had a greater sense, the way that they looked out on the world. They were more aware and alert of what's happening. And what I've come to understand is that immunological process where the body rectifies its relationship with that virus strengthens and tonifies the whole development of that individual. And so the way that the Homeoprophylaxis program is working, and we're going to talk about this, next Saturday. So I'm hoping that, people who are listening tonight or today will share with their friends, and we're looking to have, more people come to share this because when you're giving a microdose of a disease, as in homeoprophylaxis, the goal isn't to stop disease process. It isn't to, all of our Western medicine is based on actually suppressing immunological function. And if you have an immune system response, i.e. a fever, you're given an anti-febrile medicine like Tylenol. If you have a bacterial imbalance that's causing your body to have a fever, they give you antibiotics to get rid of the bacteria. There's nothing there that's helping the body do what it needs to do to, when the body's in balance, the bacteria will go away. When the body's in balance, it will rectify itself against that virus and so on and so forth. So what the homeoprophylaxis is doing in a microdose of that infectious agent is instructing the body, giving the stimulation to the body to begin what would be the rectifying immunological response in relationship to that pathogen. And if your body has rehearsed that, then there's immunological learning, and then the government or the immune system of the body can remain in balance with that. So if this is the goal of any infectious disease prevention program, is actually you want to educate the immune system so the immune system knows how to function in the face of disease. I also believe, and the reason I want to bring it into, what's happening in California there with their mandatory vaccine laws, that the role of the government should be actually to, and I think if we go to the First Amendment of the Constitution of America, that we have the indelible right to be self-determinant, I think, and safety and these things like that. So that at least the construct of democracy is intended for that to happen, which is really, it parallels what the immune system needs to do in face of infectious disease. Does that make sense more?
Yes.
Okay, good. So then this opens up a much larger discussion. What's happening around the world? What's happening with governments? What's happening with our government? What's happening with vaccines around the world? What's happening where there's places where there's such horrific turmoil between individuals? And what's happening with the basis of their government? And what's actually happening with the kinds of vaccines that are given and the kinds of infectious disease that are present in those certain circumstances. So this is a much larger question, and it's something that I've been studying for the last 5 or 7 years as I've started to see more and more, vaccines getting shipped around to different parts of the world and watching where different war is happening in different parts of the world. And then if you overlay that on the kinds of infectious disease that are in those parts, and then this also parallels, Tanya, are you familiar with Peter Chappell's work in Africa with AIDS and malaria?
Peter Chappell's work on what?
In Africa with AIDS and malaria?
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm.
So each disease has a reason to be, that actually they are like the childhood diseases, they are intended to capitulate a developmental process of an individual. Means that also if you have a group of people that are stuck in some way, that infectious agent is actually come as an act of benevolence of nature to help these people sort out what their problem is. So I'll give this story that I skipped over, said I would mention. So this is a girl in my practice who was not vaccinated, 15 years of age. She went to California to visit her father over the Christmas holidays. Somewhere along the way, she was exposed to a child who had been vaccinated with chickenpox, who shed the chickenpox virus. So she contracted chickenpox, and her body went into a, chickenpox response. And the first remedy I gave was Rust Tox. Didn't do very much, and the pox got worse and worse and worse. And she had them in her mouth, in her ears, in her nose, and her teeth. It said she felt like the teeth were falling out, and I was following this. And what I knew about this girl was that this father that she was visiting was an alcoholic, and, she lived with a mom. And so at the time, I happened to be writing one of the chapters of my book and came across a remedy that I also knew that she had had chronic headaches. And the symptom was chronic headaches in children born to alcoholic fathers. And the remedy there is syphilinum, but we know that the remedy mercury, which is a very syphilitic remedy, treats chickenpox. So I gave her mercurius. And within 6 hours, she felt an energetic shift, and the pustules stopped pustulating and started scabbing over, and within 24 hours she was, the fever had stopped and she was on the mend, and then we just needed the scabs to scab over. But in that process, she made a decision. She herself, like the larger story is at about 2 or 3 years of age, she became aware of her father's dysfunctional behavior, and she became the codependent child caretaker of the alcoholic father, right? We've seen this phenomena happen a lot. So it was not a conscious, or maybe, it was a child conscious decision, whatever it was, but in order to protect herself, she became the caretaker of him. And so when she had arrived those holidays, the first night they went to dinner and he was drinking whiskey, and she saw it, and she, her pain in her body was such that, so all other years she would be acquiescing herself and her own needs as a child is dependent on their parent in order to caretake him. But after she was given mercury, after she had the chickenpox, she told him when she left, I will not be coming to see you again. I am not taking care of you anymore. So what this infectious disease did for her was an amazing gift, because it allowed her to individuate herself from him, right? So we can look at, why children go through these infective disease states and what really is happening for them at that time. Are you getting that?
I'm going to chime in and say my daughter got whooping cough a few years ago. Very similar story.
Yeah.
She was not on homeoprophylaxis, even though Aaliyah was. So just again, for those of you that are listening or not quite clear what homeoprophylaxis is, it's basically an immune boosting homeopathic no-sode, which is used, that's made from the actual remedy, which gives the benefit without the harm and boosts your immune system. Is what I'm so passionate about. My older daughter is very stubborn, and she said, I'm not going on homeoprophylaxis. I'm not vaccinated. My body can fight itself. I'm strong. I don't want to do it. And I didn't force her, because when I started, she was 10. And her friend got vaccinated, shed,
and gave her whooping cough. And she was during midterms at the time in 11th grade, and her dad and I were in the process of a divorce, and he was not well, very similar to that story. And she was always felt like she had to save me from him and save him. It just all these things. And right towards the end, as she was healing, and I think, Kate, you were helping me, thank you, while she was going through it, and she literally, towards the end of it, one day looked at me and said, Mom, I cannot stay in this, what were her words, dysfunctional home, this dysfunctional, addictive, crazy home, and take care of all of you. You're not safe. You know what, though? I'm going to keep myself safe, and I'm leaving. If you want to come with me, you can come with me. And I was like, who are you? You're like, she's 15, 16. And she literally got a ticket, got my parents to buy her a ticket, and we all went with her. We literally left, and she saved our lives. And that was all from this. So I can just attest to that.
That's a great story. So, this brings to and this is more what I'm going to share, next week about measles, because I did a meditation, and I'm like, okay, measles has come to town. What does measles want to tell us? And it needs to tell us something. And so the work of Terry Van Der Zee and Peter Chappell in Africa is, what does AIDS have to tell us? What does malaria have to tell us? And all the diseases that are there, then they have these remedies that are energetic vibrations of those diseases that actually transmit the energy of what the disease is telling our immune system about what we need to know in ourselves. So if you look at, these pockets of infectious disease, well, throughout the Middle East, they have been vaccinated with BCG, which is the tuberculosis vaccine. And if we look at how tuberculosis works in the body, is that there's like these other infectious disease, which is in our regular vaccine protocol, or those like pneumonia and chickenpox and whooping cough, they all have a process in the body which results in final elimination of the disease, or like the virus. You finally get it out of your system, and your system should come to rest. Well, the process of tuberculosis is not like that. Tuberculosis, if you are exposed to tubercular germs, is the best defense mechanism your body can have is to create a state of inflammation and then cocoon that tubercular bacteria in a calcification. And in order to keep it cocooned, there's a constant state of inflammation that needs to be happening in the body. And when tuberculosis becomes pathogenic is when the system can no longer hold up that state of inflammation, and the calcification, the walls start breaking down, and then the tubercular bacilli, sort of start taking over parts of the body and destroying those parts of the body. So what this means on an energetic level is that, and this makes sense to homeopaths because we understand the remedy tuberculinum, which is often given to kids who are in an allergenic state. Their system is always in a state of allergic response. In children that are hyperactive, which is also a kind of allergic response, that they keep going like that. And what happens particularly, in both of those kids, you see they start getting these dark circles under their eyes because their adrenals are collapsing. And their adrenals, because their system is in this agitated state, the adrenals start collapsing, and they start becoming more and more irrational and more violent. And so when you look at what's happening, and particularly even a military soldier, the American might go into the war, military pretty healthily, but then they give them all those vaccines. Well, the vaccines do the same thing that the disease does with all the other ingredients that the vaccines have. And the soldiers that go to war, they have every single disease in them. They have anthrax and smallpox and tuberculosis, and then plus all the ones that we have on our regular vaccine schedule, which are neurotoxins and this and that. So this amount of agitation that's in the body is creating chaos, because they just want to kill as a way to, that violence we see just rising up in them. But if you look in the Middle East, and the BCG vaccine is, I mean, they're just, this world is, if we keep vaccinating world over and our governments fail to change out of the oppressive governmental form that they're wanting to take over, you know, that we have a certain amount of fight back, that we're going to fight back or rise up against those governments. If our immune system is not strong enough to do so, we will become easily herded and pushed into places that we don't want to be, and very suppressed, like those children growing up in alcoholic fathers' houses. Is that actually the gift of infectious disease is to wake us up to say, what do I need to do in order for me to survive like that? Does that make sense?
Oh, wow. Okay, so what I want to say about that, because I have hundreds of families on these programs, is, and that's the connection, I think, with the mommy gut and like what I see transform in families that really so there's a, you know, who was saying yesterday, I think Renee, we were, you know, at the seminar, and somebody just said, mommy gut just knows. I think somebody was just saying that. And it's, and I have, you know, with Dr. Pamela Middleton, you know, working in her office the past few years, and all these, you know, new moms, and I was a doula for so long, and it's like, it's this knowing of like, I know, but I'm scared, and then I see what happens to the families that are not allowing the government to rule their life and to take over. And I know this because of the person I am and the life that I've had and the voice that I have today. Like my whole throat chakra, my whole thyroid had collapsed because I would not stand up for what I knew my truth was, you know, in my relationship, in my life, in everything. I remember going to a pediatrician when the big ones were little, and every time she would say, you know, why don't you vaccinate? You know, I would shake and, you know, and I'm going to court this week, you know, for my divorce. And now my voice is, there's nothing wrong with doing the truth and listening to your gut. We're so afraid that by standing up for our truth, that what's going to happen, that the government is going to come, you know, and take over. And in Israel, you know, what we mentioned before we got on live, there was a terrorist attack. And there's a lot about, you know, we should, you know, I know people have different views on this. Obviously, everybody wants peace, and everybody wants there to be a world where the government is allowing, see, again, we're giving a power away. Everybody's praying for the government, you know, coming to a place of allowing us, you know, to have our rights back. We are, like, I get it, Kate. We are the government. The government is just a mirror of who we are inside, and the universe showing us, like,
exactly.
You gave your power
and actually,
away.
We've got the government that we have now because we let that happen inside of ourselves. So what this is showing us is that we all need to stand up. We all need to stand in ourselves, you know, so that we can govern our own self. Yeah.
So that's huge, and I see what happens, you know, so I see what happens with the families, and myself included. And again, I really just want to take a moment as we're coming to a close here, and just again, thank you, Kate, for what you've done. And sometimes the truth is like right in front of our face, and you've created a vehicle for people to really be safe, because yes, I do believe that there's a part where you want to be, right, we want to have the positive of these diseases, because it is through those things that, you know, like my daughter, I mean, she could have gotten that power. And my little one has the same courage, and she's just on homeoprophylaxis. I mean, everybody that looks at her, and, you know, Renee, you saw her this weekend, I mean, she comes to seminars with me. She sits there. She has a voice. She, you know, when they say to her in school, are you vaccinated or not? She goes, no, I did homeoprophylaxis, and I, you know, she has a voice. She's not scared.
Great.
She came to me and said, you know, Mom, if when my waiver finishes and if I can't go to school, I'm going to start my own homeschool, and I told my friends to come to my school, and you know, and it's like
that's what we need. That's the only way we're going to survive, Tanya, is these children. I mean, this is our future. This is our future, and the construct of how it is, where the mothers give their babies over to this external force, is a self-annihilatory act, I believe. I mean, not everybody
so now I get
comes
it.
to vaccines, but yeah, that's it.
So again, to summarize, so you're saying, again, all the stuff that's happening in the government is really just, my words are like just a mirror of what's happening inside, and the way to really fix that is if we do listen to our mommy gut.
Each one. Yes.
Each one by one, and then just like I see this with the homeoprophylaxis, I mean, first we had one, and then we had two, and then now we have, you know, so many families that are
dividing,
you know, that are coming along, and hopefully more. And it does. I mean, I have families that come in, and I'm sure you have the same, that come in for a little cold to get a remedy. It's, you know, and they ask if, oh, this is essential oils. This is not essential oils. This is way different. I mean, this is a way of life. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate, for your time.